That is a blood moon.
No, it isn't. It's just
The Rob and Caleb Show.
Please hang up and try again.
Torah Resource presents The Rob and Caleb Show.
All aboard!
And now, from two sides of the same state, here they are, Rob and Caleb.
What up, and shalom. Welcome to the Rob and Caleb Show. My name...
We're live.
That's right. My name is Caleb Hegg. And with me, as always, Rob Van Hoff. What up, and shalom, Rob.
Hey, loudmouth. See, I can call you that without getting in trouble.
That's right. So, what up, and shalom to everyone in our chat room. It's very exciting to have a chat room. I have another computer right next to me now. So now I actually have three screens to look at. And to be honest with you, we have like way more people in the chat room than I ever thought we were going to have in the chat room, which is exciting.
Okay, we have to train people. So somewhere, you guys, you online chatters, you in the message board, you can roll dice. So I don't know, you have to like click your name on the online user tab, and there's a way to roll dice. At certain times in our broadcast, we might say first person to roll like a 5 or something. And so everybody can roll, and it'll just be whoever clocks the first thing. And then we might give you a call out or a prize of some sort. Right? We just want to make use of this technology.
We're going to have to figure out some kind of game with that. Well, hey, we're very excited to be live, and I know for a lot of our listeners, it's like nothing big because they're just going to listen to the broadcast as if it were a podcast on Thursday or, some other time that it airs. But for us, it's pretty exciting. Broadcasting live from Washington State, and we got people from all over the world listening to us right now. And, oh, look at that. Andre Felipe just...
They're already rolling dice.
They're rolling dice right now on the chat room.
Cool. Okay. It's just to get you ready. It's just to warm you up.
You guys can, if you're not in the chat room already, if you're listening to this live and you're not in the chat room, then you can go to trradio.com and then click on broadcast, go down to the Rob and Caleb Show. And right there, you will see a chat room. You can join the conversation with all of our friends online. And you can, maybe every once in a while, if there's a question or something, if we keep an eye on the chat room, that's really going to be the defining point. Mostly it's for you guys to be able to chat back and forth and to bring up Bible verses or whatever you want to. Bring up points and discuss among yourselves. But we'll keep an eye on the chat room as well. And if there's some really good points, then we'll bring them up. Anyway, so another thing that I wanted to mention is, as I said last week, we got... stickers in, and we got the Rob and Caleb Show, Tipping Sacred Cows every Thursday. And then we got I'm One of the 36. We still have stickers left, and you can receive a sticker for totally for free by writing me an email, chegg@torahresource.com, and in the subject part put sticker, and then just tell me which one you want. You can, I think on our Facebook page, we put Tipping Sacred Cows was number 1, and I'm One of the 36 is number 2. So just let us know which one you want, and we'll send it out to you, as long as we have your address. All right, well, how you been, Rob? Anything new in life?
It's house cleaning season, as you know.
Passover's coming up.
Passover.
Yeah.
My wife's got this huge honey-do list. So I've been happily, with a smile, doing all, cleaning out this and that. Those ceiling fans?
Yeah. Yes. Nice.
That's what I've been doing. It's clean, though. It's nice.
Well, it is that season, isn't it? It's Passover. And what does that mean? It means that since it's 2015... Well, actually, blood moons is what it means. But before we get to that, I want to actually talk about something else. I want to talk about something that we talked about last week. Hang on just a sec. Let me get back to my... okay, so I got some clips here. Someone, first of all, commented on our show from last week, and they said, last week we talked What did we talk? We talked about the location of the temple, okay? And there were people who were saying that the temple was actually over in the city of David and not where the Temple Mount is, okay? And so we also laid out 7 rules or seven red flags that we look for when we're listening to a new teaching or something like that. Well, we had some interaction on that, which was actually quite interesting because one person disagreed with one of the 7 laws. And we expect people will disagree with our 7 laws or our 7 red flags. But basically, these are things that we find to be, we take a historical grammatical interpretation of the Bible. And so these are 7 things that we wrote down that we thought were musts when it comes to our interpretation, how we interpret things. The one that someone basically there's this guy, he's not very kind to us most of the time. I deleted all of his comments, and perhaps I shouldn't have, but I deleted them because they were rude and they weren't very constructive. And he had taken exception to one of the rules, and now I wish that I wouldn't have deleted this so I could quote him. But basically what he said was, you guys aren't scholars. You know, you tout yourself as scholars all the time, but you're not scholars. And you don't know what in the world you're talking about. He said, I almost fell off my chair laughing and in disbelief when you said that we couldn't read the rabbis into the 1st century. He said that the Mishnah was written in the 3rd century, 200s AD, and that even though it was written then, it's oral tradition that goes back to at least 200 years before the time of the Messiah. So that's what he took exception to, was our rule number 5, or our flag number 5 is, are they using anachronistic arguments? Here's the problem with this theory that the rabbis go back 200 years before the time of the Messiah, or all the way back to Sinai. The problem is, who says that they did that? Who says that they go back that far, that oral tradition goes back that far? They say it. The rabbis are the ones who say it.
Are you saying I can't testify about myself, Caleb? Are you going to razz me?
Well, yeah.
If we were in a court of law, how do we establish a matter?
Yeah, exactly, by 3 or 4 witnesses. But all the witnesses are the ones that are saying, of the Mishnah, are the ones that are saying that their word goes back that far. They're testifying of themselves. You're absolutely right. So I don't know. I just, you can't say, oh, well, I can't say, yeah, I said this and it goes back 300 years. And then everybody
you
just
have to believe me because I tell you.
Yeah, you have to believe me because I tell you. It just doesn't work like that. So we don't have any other sources that say, yeah, this goes all the way back to, 200 years before the time of the Messiah. That's not a valid argument. You can't use that argument. So anyway, he commented, I deleted his comments because he doesn't want to have a conversation. What he wants to do is he wants to try to tick us off. And
that's not to say what we're saying about the Mishnah or any, the Mishnah is like, we were not going to treat that any different than we would treat Josephus or, this or that text from the Dead Sea Scrolls or Philo. These are, but we understand, we want to understand where they were written. We want to understand who wrote them, what language did they use. We want to give locality to our sources. We don't want to take the Talmud. The Talmud wasn't written to be a background for the 1st century. So if I comb through the Talmud looking for secrets to the life of Yeshua, I'm going to distort the intent of those who compiled the Talmud. Those who compiled the Talmud weren't interested in that. They were interested in what their issues were.
I want to bring up our first. Hang on just a sec. I want to bring up our first comment from the chat room. Okay, Lois Morgan says, Yeshua said, "If you testify of yourself, you testify. Your testimony is false." Thank you, Lois Morgan. Anyway, thank you.
Well, the idea is, build on. It says the Torah says we need 2 or 3 witnesses to establish a matter, right? And of course, the Torah specifically is talking about in a capital case, death penalty. But the principle is there. The principle is don't just believe something because somebody tells you. That's like, I mean, then gossip would be. How would we ever discern? You know? Why does it say wisdom is in a multitude of counsel? You know, we need to take these principles. And so to be honest, to use just weights and measures, we can look at the Mishnah, then we can look at, say, the Dead Sea Scrolls and Josephus and the Gospels and maybe, you know, other writings from the, you know, before the, I'm saying, you know, between the temple times, if you want to put it that way, or early Second Temple period, and see if there's trends, if there's Jewish cultural truths that we can see because they share these things. Then we have something to work with. But we want to be careful. You know, the Mishnah is not scripture, and I know there are friends of ours in the Body of Messiah who believe in oral Torah, that it's authoritative, that it's from God. And that's very problematic, and I do not believe that. It's not scripture. The Talmud is not scripture.
Well, and one of the things that I always have to remind myself of, and you can disagree with this if you want to. I mean, people out there can disagree with this if they want to or not. But the rabbis made stuff up, and they made stuff up to be able to have more authority. Nothing gives a story weight by saying that it goes all the way back to Moses.
Did you see that in the Talmud it says like Moses was like 10 cubits tall or 15,
yes.
15 cubits tall? It says that a couple times. I mean, should we take that and say, oh, Moses was a giant? He was like, he was taller than Goliath or than the king of Bashan, you know? I mean,
Okay, with all that in mind, okay, let's listen.
This really doesn't have anything to do with our show, does it?
No, well, kind of. Okay, with all that in mind, let's listen. So a different person put a link on our show last week. They're trying to prove that the temple is in the city of David. And this is now I kind of edited this clip a little bit. By the way, if you want to, now another new thing that we implemented is show notes. So if you want show notes, you can find all of our, like every single clip that I use today. There is a URL in, like, you can, there's a link in the show notes. You can go and you can click it. If you want to see the whole context of what people are saying, or if you want to listen to the entire teaching, you can go to the show notes. Okay. And you can find those show notes on the exact same page as the chat, which is Torah Resource, trradio.com. Then go to broadcast, Rob and Caleb show, and you'll find them on that page. Okay. So listen to what this person put as a link to disprove us, that the temple is actually in the city of David. Here you go.
Where is the real Temple Mount? Two great Hebrew sages give us the answer. Rabbi Moses ben Maimon, Maimonides, 1135 to 1204. Rabbi David Kimchi, Radak, 1160 to 1235. Maimonides quote, "As far as the sanctuary in Jerusalem were concerned, the first sanctification by King Solomon hallowed them for all time to come. Wherefrom the sages have averred, even though they are desolate at the time of Maimonides, the sanctuaries retain their pristine holiness. Now, just as we are obliged to keep the Sabbath for all time to come, so must we reverence the sanctuary, or the temple, for all time to come, for even though it is in ruins, its sanctity endures."
Okay, now he's going to keep going here, and he's going to quote the next rabbi. That might not seem that relevant, okay? But he ties it in.
And Radak's quote, "And the temple is still in ruins, in that the temple site was never built on by the nations." Commentary on Isaiah 64:10. Here is a startling fact. By the time these revered sages made these statements, the Dome of the Rock Mosque had been in existence for about 500 years. The mosque was certainly not in ruins. This leads us to one unavoidable conclusion. The actual site of the Temple Mount could not be where the Dome of the Rock Mosque stands today.
Okay, there's several problems with this sound clip, okay? Number one, basically, I think everybody gets it, but basically what he's saying is these two rabbis are saying that the time that they're there, where the temple stood, has not been defiled. And it hasn't been defiled by having something built over it that's not a new temple. Okay, that's what they're saying. And what this person's point he's making is that The mosque was standing. These rabbis were in the late 1100s, so 12th century, late 12th century.
Wait, these are great Hebrew sages.
Yes.
No, the great sages.
Great sages, yes.
Ding. That's when we want to.
Let me get my bell here. All right, here you go.
That's okay. Oh, I thought you were going to.
Okay, so there's two issues with this. First of all, there are multiple ideas of where the temple stood on the Temple Mount. Just because the mosque is standing on the Temple Mount does not mean it's standing where the temple actually was. They say that the Holy of Holies was. Many people say that the Holy of Holies is not where the mosque was. Another problem is that how did those rabbis know where the temple was, or the temple was on the Temple Mount? They didn't. They're 1,000 years after the temple stood. Any thoughts on this, Rob?
Oral tradition.
Oral tradition. Yeah.
I mean, he quotes two medieval rabbis, Rambam, right? Maimonides, and Radah, David. I'm glad he didn't say kimchi. My wife likes to eat kimchi. It's kimchi. He actually said correctly kimchi. It's got a chet in there. But yeah, I mean, these guys were heirs to Torah Sheba'al Peh, oral Torah, and they knew from their rabbis, who knew from their rabbis, who knew from their rabbis, all the way back. So why not? Why don't we just build on what Rambam says?
Not only that, but the Himki guy, he's doing a midrash on, or he's teaching on Isaiah. And so I think that I haven't gone in and read the text, but I would have to read the text. I think he's making a bigger point here. I think that there's an ulterior motive.
We can't use. I was exaggerating, right?
Yeah, of course.
We can't use. Sure, we'll say, okay, thank you, noted. Rambam said this. Okay, noted. Next. That doesn't mean we build on it. Now, he does show that there's different opinion, but
it just seems to me that from the archaeological evidence and from the arguments that the archaeologists have made about the archaeology of the Temple Mount, that this other side, this side that's saying that the temple was down in the city of David, they need to answer some questions, which they haven't answered. That's a problem.
I think that there could be an interest here, particularly in medieval times. Those rabbis, the rabbis that ever even went to Jerusalem, I don't even know, I don't remember if Rambam ever went to Jerusalem personally. I know he was in Egypt and in Spain, but he certainly wouldn't have had access to the Temple Mount. And the idea of a Muslim worship house being built on that would have been very, very devastating to conceive of. Like, how could God let this happen? And so trying to find a way around it would serve that purpose. Like, just to explain away.
Yeah, explain away the mosque.
Explain away what we call theodicy, right? How does God allow such an evil thing? Well, one way is to say, actually, is to teach people that where the Muslims built their thing isn't really the Temple Mount. So it's not really...
The Holy of Holies wasn't right there, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. So you could see that there are other interests besides, quote, truth. Just dealing with the difficulties of the world, and the problem, what?
No doubt.
So anyway.
Okay, let's move on. So as we said, Passover's coming up. And Booyah. And with Passover coming up in 2015, of course, the whole hype about the blood moons, quote unquote, and I'm using quote marks here because they're not... I was going to pull another clip. I had a clip of, who was it? Hagee saying, oh no, actually, check this out. So I'm preparing for this show. And
which is rare.
I'm preparing for this show, and I get this email. Like, I have all my clips pulled and everything. This is where this was. I have all my clips pulled and everything. And all of a sudden, at the end of the day, I'm just about to leave. And I get this email from a Rabbi Charlie Edwards. I don't know who that is. Maybe I've met him before. I don't know. But he writes this email. It's got to be 3 pages long. And it's all about the blood moons. And he says in here, where is it? He says, these eclipses are known as are called the blood moons. Well, they're not called the blood moons by anybody else except for the people who believe that they're blood moons. I just thought it was interesting that like I'm preparing for this show, and all of a sudden this guy writes this expose on the blood moons. So let's use the 7 red flags to test out the blood moon theory. If you don't know what the blood moon theory is, basically in Joel, and for those of you who have the show notes, I have all of these scripture verses here. I also have a bunch of links too. But so in Joel 2:31, he says, "The sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes." Okay, and then it's cited. They cite it again in Acts 2:20. "The sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the day of the Lord comes, the great and magnificent day." So from this, people now take these lunar eclipses that are happening, and these are actually now, okay, maybe I should let's let Mark Biltz start us off here. Actually, so much of this is attributed to Hagee, John Hagee, who's a Christian pastor. So if you're Christian or Messianic, doesn't really matter. You've probably heard about the blood moons. But Hagee was not the first one to come up with this. In fact, I would say that he pretty much ripped it off. And he ripped it off of a guy named Mark Biltz. Mark Biltz is a gentleman here in the Tacoma area. He runs a ministry and a congregation here in Tacoma. And it's quite large, actually. I know many people who go to his congregation. And he's a very nice guy. But he came out with this whole blood moon theory thing. And actually, he didn't start it either. There was another guy here in the Tacoma area many years ago, back in like 1996. And his name was Greg Killian. I have a link for everyone in the show notes if you want a link for it. Greg Killian he has a different name now. He changed his name as, once he became a Messianic rabbi, he changed his name to something else. But Killian used to go to the congregation that I go to way back in the day when I was like 7 or 8 years old. And in 1996, he wrote this article. I've given you the article there on the show notes. And basically, he talks about the blood moons way back then. And so Biltz didn't really come up with this either.
So what is it with Tacoma and heresies? Torah Resource.
I wouldn't call the blood moons heresies. If you believe in the blood moon, if you believe that these lunar eclipses coming up are the blood moons, okay, fair enough. That's your prerogative. You can believe that. That's not a heresy. I don't buy it. Full disclosure, I don't buy it. But
I was joking about heresies.
Well, I'll tell you what, though. There is a significant amount of Messianics in the Tacoma area. There's a lot of Messianic congregations, and in Washington in general. I would say that we have more than most states. I can pretty much walk to anywhere in Tacoma, if I'm anywhere in Tacoma, there is a Messianic synagogue within a 10-minute drive. They don't all have their heads on straight, but there's a Messianic congregation close. Okay. So let's start with Biltz, okay? So Mark Biltz is really the guy who came out and where did I get this clip? Of course, our good friend Sid Roth. The Tacoma Heresy Connection. I see the book deal. Thank you, Adam. Okay, so let's start with Biltz. Here you go. I want to make sure I got the right clip here. Yes, I do. Okay. And give me just a second here. I'm opening a new program. There we go. Here we go.
Cricket sounds.
And I got to thinking about the Bible verses, with the moon turning to blood and the sun to sackcloth. And so what did I do? I said, let's see if there's any interesting eclipses coming up. And so I looked, and I saw there were these 4 total lunar eclipses in a row. And I thought, well, how often does that happen? And so I was going to NASA's website, and I saw it didn't happen at all in the 1800s, didn't happen in the 1700s, didn't happen in the 1600s.
So it's pretty rare.
It's very, as a matter of fact, after my research, I found it has only happened 8 times in the last 2,000 years
That's
that
rare.
these have fallen on the biblical feast days.
Sid. Oh, Sid. That's rare. So what he says is he's talking about these lunar eclipses. And basically what happens is the Earth comes in between the moon and the sun, and the light coming around the Earth from the sun bounces off of the moon, and it gives it this red hue, okay? And that's why it appears red, okay? This from Answers in Genesis. Last year when we talked about blood moons, we used this article, I think, almost exclusively. Well, I have one quote from it. I'm going to use it right here. Total lunar eclipses aren't that unusual. There will be 85 total lunar eclipses in the 21st century. The greatest length of time between 2 consecutive total lunar eclipses is only 3 years. In between these droughts will be occurrences of 3 or even 4 total lunar eclipses, each separated by about 6 months. A little more than half the Earth's surface can witness at least a portion of a particular eclipse, remember that. So from any given location, total lunar eclipses aren't quite as common as these statistics might suggest. That's not what Biltz is talking about, though. Let's give Biltz credit where credit is due. What Biltz is pointing out is 4 total lunar eclipses in a row that all fall on biblical holidays. That is not rare, or that is not common. That's rare. I'll give him that. And I think there's been 7 since the time of Yeshua. And they say that one happens during the time of Yeshua, like at his execution. Because there was one that happened in 32 and 33. So, that might be right. It depends where you put the execution of the Messiah. What Passover he was on. And you can't be dogmatic about that, though. It can the time of the Messiah, his death could slide, 5 years in either direction. You think I'm off on that, Rob?
I haven't looked into all that. I just looked into the more recent ones, the blood moons, in terms of the first century. I don't know. Okay,
so the first blood moon didn't even.
It does seem to think going from Scripture, from Acts 2. It does seem that Kepha, or Peter, when he's preaching, that he's associating the prophecy of Joel with Yeshua's crucifixion.
Okay, but look. The point is that it seems like there was this earthquake. It seems like there was darkness all over the earth. That's not a blood moon, and it's not a solar eclipse either. Right? It's something supernatural happened when the Messiah died.
Well, and the idea of blood moon, the Scriptures do not tell us what a moon turning to blood means. It's other people saying, oh, that means the eclipse. It's like, okay. And then they want to take that assumption and build on it, and then take this phrase, moon turned to blood, out of the context of all these other things that are happening simultaneously, and making a big whoop-de-doo about it.
Okay.
That's what it seems like to me.
Okay,
it seems like sensationalist marketing. That's what it seems like to me.
Okay. Let's keep going. I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat room, but I'll let other people deal with that for right now. Okay, so I want to make a couple of points about the blood moons. Okay, the first blood moon in this 4 set, okay, which was supposed to start last Passover. Last Passover was like the first one, and the next one was at Sukkot, and then the next one is supposed to be on the night of the 4th, and then the next one will be next Sukkot. Okay, the first one was not on the first night of Passover. Everybody says, oh, it was the first night of Passover. No, it wasn't. In 2014, the 14th of Nisan happened to fall on the 14th of April. The festival started on April 13th at sundown. So April 13th at sundown, boom, there was That's when Passover started.
No, April or
I'm sorry, April 13th. Yeah, April
Nissan.
Yeah. But
Nissan 14th.
Yeah. Okay, so 14th to the 15th, right?
Right.
Okay. Am I off? Maybe I'm off. Anyway, so the point, even this year though, the same thing happens. It's off by an evening. So in other words, we start Passover this year on the 3rd, April 3rd, the night of the 3rd. It's a Friday night, right? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the 14th is what we would call like a Friday, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
I know they're not exactly coextensive, but in the West they call Friday is basically Nissan 14. When the sun goes down, we transition into Nissan 15, which is now technically we're in Shabbat now.
Yeah, and so the lunar eclipse doesn't happen until Saturday night. Even more so, last year at Sukkot, it wasn't even on Sukkot. The 8th day of Sukkot had come and gone. It was that evening. So it wasn't even on the festival. Okay, the 4 blood moons can't be seen from Israel. You would think that the blood moons, the quote, blood moons, would be seen from Israel. They're not. I think one of them was for like 2 minutes in the morning one time. There will be a great earthquake. Stars will go dark and fall, and great darkness will be over the entire earth. Okay, now that's an interesting point. One of the things that the proponents of this whole blood moon thing, people just take this and eat it up. But it doesn't seem like there's been a lot of pushback. Nobody's asked them about like earthquakes or stars going dark or falling. In Joel 2:3, it says the earthquakes before them and the stars withdraw their shining. Revelation 6:12 through 13, there was a great earthquake, and the stars of the sky fell to the earth. Matthew 24:29, and the stars will fall from heaven. Ezekiel 32:7 through 8. So this is talking about the same, it seems like the same events. It says, I will cover the heavens and make the stars dark. Then later on in that same verse, he says, all the bright lights of heaven will I make dark over you and put darkness on your land. So that doesn't sound like a solar eclipse. That sounds like everything's dark and the stars go dark and everything. But Biltz and Hagee, these guys don't want to, they don't want to have to talk about that. Okay, so let's move on to another clip. This guy, he kind of explains, this guy's kind of debunking, if you will, the whole blood moons thing. Listen to what he says, though. He kind of sets this up and explains all this, I think, pretty well.
Cross-referencing these dates with Jewish historical events, Biltz claimed the following connections between these tetrads and significant events in Jewish history. For example, he says that the tetrad that occurred in 1493 through 1494 corresponded with the Spanish Inquisition. He says that the tetrad that occurred in 1949 through 1950 corresponded with the 1948 War of Independence. And he says that the tetrad that occurred in 1967 through 1968 corresponded with the Six-Day War. Biltz and John Hagee suggest that because, according to this model, significant events in Jewish history have transpired around the time of blood moon tetrads, the upcoming blood moon tetrad of 2014 and 2015 will herald significant events related to biblical prophecy, citing that these eclipses are fulfilling the sun, moon, and star signs in the Bible. The question is, how does this theory bear up against biblical scrutiny and common sense?
Okay, so basically Biltz, here's one of the things that Biltz kind of dropped the ball on. He doesn't explain to anyone how these huge events that happen at blood moons, how they line up. He says that the Spanish Inquisition was one of them. He says that Israel becoming a state is one of them.
But wait a minute, the Spanish Inquisition.
Yeah.
Do you realize how big of a span of time that was?
Yeah. Okay. Hang on. We're getting to that. But first, so the Spanish Inquisition seems like a bad thing for the Jews. Israel becoming a state seems like a good thing for the Jews, right? So what is it? Is God giving us good signs or bad signs? Well, Hagee kind of picks up the pieces where Biltz drops them. Hagee states that the blood moons signal something that starts as a tragedy but turns to be a blessing for the Jews. Okay? So, I got a bunch of clips here. Let's listen to Biltz first.
out it happened during the Inquisition, 1492, when Columbus sails the ocean blue.
Now, why was that? Now, that was pretty bad for us Jewish people, because we Jews were literally left, if we didn't leave, we'd be murdered. So it wasn't too good for us Jewish people, but it had an effect on the world. What was that?
Sure it did, because they expelled all the Jews on the 9th of Av, and also in Portugal in 1493, 1494. What happens? King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella are taking all the Jewish wealth, but that is what helped finance the finding of the New World and all the Jews coming over to America.
So, in your opinion, if the Jews hadn't been expelled and Christopher Columbus, who is Jewish, and you told me also there were a number of his crew that were Jewish, why? Because they had to leave Spain, they might not have founded America.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so let's stop it right there. I don't even know where to start with this.
Oy vey.
Yeah, so I don't know where to start with this. This sounds a little sensational to me right now. And that's one of our, that's one of our red flags, is that it sounds sensational. First of all, the Spanish Inquisition, so many thousands and thousands and thousands of people died. Now, Biltz is suggesting that because there were Jews on the ships that came to America, that made up for the thousands of lives that died. Like a handful of Jews that came over on the ships, all of a sudden, that's gonna make the difference. That makes it all worth it. I don't understand what the point is. But then again, once again, here comes Hagee. Hagee comes in to save the day, and let's listen to what Hagee has to say now. Listen to the end of this clip, Rob. This is interesting. Maybe I'm mishearing this quote. This is about an hour and a minute and 20 seconds. So, but stay tuned for the end of this clip.
As you've said, we've only had blood moons, about 4 blood moons, about 3 times over the past, I think, 520 years or so. And each time it seems that they coincide with events that have great significance for Israel and the Jewish people. Let's start with the blood moons of 1493 and 1494, that period.
Yes.
Why were they so significant? Why was that a significant period in Jewish history when these 4 blood moons occurred?
Okay. In that period of time, the Jewish people were expelled from the country of Spain. King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, with the condolence of the Catholic Church, terminated the right of the Jewish people to live in Spain. They wrote this edict of expulsion and gave them 14 days.
Okay, hang on just a sec before we go on. So he's talking about Spain. He's only talking about Spain here, right? So he's not talking about Jews all over the world. He's talking about Spain.
To leave everything and get out of the country. They could only carry what they left. So the Jewish people were expelled. That was also the point in time where Jewish business leaders went to Christopher Columbus and gave him maps and money, and he left in the same year. And the next year, 1492, they discovered America, which became the homeland of the Jewish people.
Did you catch that?
That America?
That's what he says. Hang on, let's listen to it again. Okay, everybody, here you go. Here that quote is again.
Discovered America, which became the homeland of the Jewish people.
So,
well, here's the other thing. Besides this, there are many Jews elsewhere in the world. Not all the Jews were in. See, this is one of the Jews from Spain. It makes it seem like all the Jews were in Spain.
Yeah, exactly. No, I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you.
Yes, it doesn't. This is not to lessen, just to the impact of, then the
Spanish Inquisition was a horrible thing.
Situation,
yeah.
But nevertheless, we can't overstate it either. And it just seems like everything's getting overstated. Like Columbus had to discover America because he was Jewish and many of his people were Jewish, and they had to leave. So they took a bunch of money from other Jews that funded their trip to America, and they founded America. That was it's crazy.
Hey, to me, this just shows that Hagee, I don't know what Hagee's theology is, but I have to assume now that from this last quote, he's a replacement theologian. Okay, he believes that the church replaced Israel. But what it sounds like from this last quote from Hagee, to me, what it sounds like, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but what it sounds like to me is that Hagee is saying that America has replaced Israel as the homeland.
Yeah, it sounded that way. Except he's pro state of Israel.
He's so pro-Israel, and that's the weird part, is that Hagee's super pro-Israel. So I don't understand this quote. What's he saying? How did America become the homeland of the Jews? That doesn't make any sense to me at all. And theologically, I don't think it holds any weight.
Well, I mean, historically, of course, America has been, a place for all sorts of immigrants to come, and many Jews have come here and prospered. But that's one thing. But yeah, his statement is, I wonder if we, cornered him on that, maybe he would clarify for us. I don't know.
I would say that
I don't listen to John Hagee, and I don't read any of his stuff, so
I would say that America is more the land of the Irish than it is the homeland of the Jews. There were so many Irish people who came over here, right? This land was like founded by Irish people. I mean, not completely, obviously, I'm being facetious, but okay. So let's keep going. Hagee makes now in this next soundbite that I have. Hagee lets us know that God aligns everything, the stars, the moon, everything, and he makes it sound like God is very exact. Okay, which I agree with. God is very exact, right? Let's see here. What clip am I looking for? 98. Okay, listen to this.
The sun and the moon and the earth are controlled by God Almighty. He is the one that's getting them in a direct alignment on a certain day at a certain time, but each time it's a Passover or Sukkot. Passover and Sukkot, and he does it 2 years in a row. And every time this has happened in the past, it has been a historical something that happened that changed the destiny of the world involving the Jewish people.
So Marty tells us that Hagee is now super pro-Israel, but he used to be a huge proponent of replacement theology. Okay, good to know. So in this last clip, basically what Hagee sounds to me like he's saying is that God is very exact. He's got the stars, the moon, the sun, the earth. He's got it all working together, and that he's lining everything up with the festivals and everything. Okay, I certainly agree that the Almighty is just that, Almighty. Yes, he is doing all those things. There is no doubt in my mind. Okay, he's very exact. Listen to this clip. This I love, and this is what makes me. These guys just peddle this stuff as if it's, and this goes back to what you said earlier. The Spanish Inquisition was this huge span of time.
The first point, when reviewing the historical accuracy of Biltz's claim that Jewish history seems to converge with lunar eclipse tetrads that fall on Jewish feast days, we find that it's not very accurate at all. So the first thing that we need to do is examine Hagee and Biltz's assertion that these tetrads actually lined up with significant events at all. So often we simply take for granted that this is true, and as we will see, that would be a huge mistake. Did you know that there were actually 2 other tetrad events that fell on Jewish holidays that Biltz found in the NASA computers? Well, he did, but he doesn't like to say much about those because, even according to him, nothing significant happened on those 2 occasions.
Oops!
Right there, that should give us pause. Okay, so how do we know that this upcoming tetrad in 2014-2015 won't be another dud like the other 2 that they don't like to mention? Based on these numbers, so far almost 50% of these tetrads on Jewish holidays don't mean a thing, even by their own admission. Another point is that the dates of the historical events for which these tetrads supposedly correlate do not seem to correlate very well at all to the dates of the tetrads themselves. For example, the Spanish Inquisition actually started some 15 years before the 1493-94 tetrad, and ended roughly 350 years later. They try to give this some credibility by saying that, What the Tetrad is really connected with is the so-called Alhambra decree issued on the 31st of March, 1492, which officially expelled the Jews from Spain. But even then, the first eclipse didn't occur until over a year later, and the last eclipse over 2 years later. So unless you call being off by a year God's way of predicting something, then this isn't a match.
Okay, so right there, I mean, Hagee is talking about how exact God is. You know, he's got it all. God's got it all lined up. I agree with him on that. But then he tries to say that all these align, but it's off by a year. How does that work?
The next so-called match is supposed to be when Israel declared its independence in 1948 and won the war for independence the same year.
And now this should be easy because, I mean, we have exact dates for all this, right? Specific exact dates.
The dates of the 1949-1950 Tetrad, again, didn't occur until over a year later, and didn't fall on any of the dates of Israel's victories, or on the day that the UN recognized them as a state, or any other significant date. Trust me, if there was any significance to the actual dates of these Tetrads, you would have heard about it. But the best they can do is, as we will see in the next one, coming within 10 months of an event. So yeah, the last one they say occurred in conjunction with the 6-Day War. But in reality, it didn't start until 10 months after the war ended. And the last eclipse didn't occur until a full year after that. Again, these three obvious non-matches look even worse when you consider that they have already thrown 2 sets of historical Tetrads in the trash because they couldn't find any historical events to match them with. So these 3 represent the best of the best, and that is pretty sad.
So, I mean, basically what this guy, and once again, you can find this link, the link to this guy in our show notes. But basically what this guy is showing, no, they're not even, you know, Hagee says that God is exact, but according to Hagee, he's not that exact because these dates are so far off. And to me, I mean, this isn't one of those things that gets me ticked off. You know, the blood moons, if you want to believe in the blood moons, that's fine. Hey, you know what? God can do whatever he wants. If one of these lunar eclipses happens to be at a time when God starts something off, okay, fine. But what it sounds like to me is that Hagee and Biltz and all these guys, they're trying to pump stuff up into something bigger than what it is. You know, they're trying to attribute things, natural occurrences, to God's miraculousness. Oh, it's a natural occurrence. It must be this miraculous thing that the Bible talks about. To me, that downplays the miraculous deeds that the Lord's going to do in the end times. You know, when the blood turns to moon and the sun is darkened and the stars are darkened and they start falling from the sky and the whole earth is filled with darkness, people are going to say there's something going on here. This is not cool. They're not going to be like, "Oh, it's so pretty. Look at the lunar eclipse. It's so pretty." That's my personal opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is the lunar eclipse. I just don't, you know, it just doesn't stand up to scrutiny, in my opinion. Rob?
Yeah, I hear you. As a matter of fact, what I just posted on our chat room is the dates. I remember my son was taking a college course on astronomy, and he had to get this software package, and it was right, you know, a year and a half ago. And I remember looking at all these times, how they relate in these 2 years that we're in now, and times and visibility. And I just see how it's where we take something and conflate it, you know? It's like we want it to mean something. Right? That's what I'm seeing, is that we want it to mean something. And so we'll create it. Why? Because we want the excitement. We want that sensational kind of sense that God's doing something or that we're living in a significant time. You know, Yeshua just said, watch and pray. You know, it's really simple. We should always, it shouldn't matter to us. If we're obedient to Yeshua's instructions, to be vigilant, to be, you know, watchful and prayerful, and, you know, we take to heart his teaching about the servant whose master tarries, and so he gets lazy, and he says, therefore I'll start mistreating, you know, other people and stuff like that. That it's going to be like a thief in the night. You know, the person who was vigilant and watchful isn't going to be taken by surprise. Well, you know, this idea of the blood moons shouldn't affect our walk at all. They're of no consequence in terms of how we are called to walk and to be. So it seems to me that these are just distractions and things that people get worked up over. They sell a bunch of books. I bet I would suggest there are millions of dollars have been made.
Oh yeah.
On blood moon. Was it just the other day? Someone was asking for money on TBN or something.
Oh wait! I got a clip for you.
Oh, okay.
I got a clip for
Anyway,
you. I'm glad you brought it up. I'm glad you brought it up. Oh, well, you can finish your thought by all means.
No, I was just that's the point. What I posted on the message board is just what I found there. You know, in terms of Jerusalem time last year and this year, what they're going to be. They're not visible from Jerusalem. They're not visible from the land of Israel, and so it's just. There's details. Now this is a more precise detail than, say, placing the blood moon in the late 1400s with respect to the, couple 100-year span of the Spanish Inquisition. But there's just so many things are overstated. That's almost like if you just listen to these guys, you'd believe all the Jews in the world were in Spain and got kicked out, right? And that that Christopher Columbus and his crew were mostly Jewish, right? And they came and founded America. And that the dates about around the founding of Israel, all these things, they're just overstated to try to get people.
They're twisted.
Yeah, it's like why do we have to resort to this kind of sensationalism? I don't understand what the gain is. What is the gain in terms of edification for the body of Messiah? That's the bottom line. The bottom line is that love edifies, right? That's what we're taught. When we keep the commandments, when we love God, right? The Shema and V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, you love your neighbor as yourself. That's a full-time effort. That's where our hearts need to be. And everything will work out from there. These other things seem to be distractions from that. And people get worked up. People who already aren't grounded in the scriptures are the ones that are eating this up. I would guess. Anyway, I'm going off a little.
Ooh, but you're not worked up.
The Hoff went off.
Well, I have the music, but we'll save it. Okay.
Anyway,
so
I didn't even know we were going to spend this much time on it. That's cool.
I didn't either, but there's one thing I got. Okay, we got an email from someone. They said there's this person on, and I had never even heard of this website or this network. Maybe I'm behind the times. It's TCT. Did Trinity Broadcasting Network become TCT? Do I not know?
I don't know.
Anyway, so TCT, she said, I'm watching this thing. They're using the blood moons. They're raising money. That it's like some telethon or whatever. They're raising money. This is horrible. You need to talk about this. I went and looked at it. It's this guy named Steve Munsey. I've never heard of him either, but apparently he's some bigwig in the TV evangelist world. This broadcast, if you need a good laugh, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be rude or anything like that, but if you need a good laugh, this is something you could watch. And yeah, so they have this huge studio, and all of the seats are pretty much empty. They got 2 rows of about 4 people per row. Right up in front, and they really won't show you much more than that. And when they do, it's completely empty, and no one's clapping for him. And so they keep putting this clap track in and then fading the clap track out so it doesn't sound right, which is hilarious. Anyway, and then there's all sorts of different problems. First of all, this guy. Within his, I watched the first 30 minutes of this thing, unfortunately, but he's talking about the blood moons the whole time. Within the first 30 minutes, he asks Toys R Us, Obama, and Vladimir Putin, if they're watching, to please donate money. I'm not joking. Okay.
Toys R Us was watching? Is that is Toys R Us a person?
No, he was like, oh yeah, well he got these red balls to show the blood moon, to try to give you a visual of the blood moons. He's like, I just got these from Toys R Us. So Toys R Us, if you're watching, please send money. Please send a donation. What are you talking about? So I had to wade through all of this to try to find a really, really good clip. Also, he says that Sukkot is, and this is neither here nor there.
Wait, Sukkot.
Yeah, he says Sukkot is.
Hey, he says Sukkot.
He says that is the atonement, which is actually Yom Kippur. For those who might not know, Yom Kippur is actually the Day of Atonement, not Sukkot. Okay, but I figured that this was probably the best clip to give you, Rob. I thought that you would enjoy this probably the most. Listen to this. This actually has no rhyme or reason for our show, except for that I just thought it was too good to pass up. It is 1 minute and 47 seconds long.
In a few days, there will be a third blood moon. Okay, let me break it down. Let me break it down. In Acts, the 2nd chapter, it says, I will turn the moon to blood and hide the sun, and there will be vapor of smoke, which is nuclear. Has anybody noticed in the news there's a lot of talk about nuclear?
Nuclear?
Did we not on television for the first time in the history of America have a prime minister from another country come in without the invitation of the president to express his concern about Iran and nuclear? In the same verse, well, you say it says vapor of smoke. Well, let me explain about vapor of smoke.
Please explain.
Vapor of smoke means, if you look it up, it means a mushroom. Means a mushroom. Vapor of smoke in the Bible means a mushroom. Meaning, when they dropped the bomb on Japan, it looked just like this. The vapor of smoke went up. It went up like a mushroom. And what he's talking about, which he's talking about nuclear disaster. Now, you're saying, is nuclear disaster coming? No, I didn't say that. What I'm saying is that something drastically in the talk of what's going on. And the next verse, I love the next verse. This will make everybody feel good. The next verse says, and they shall call upon the name of the Lord and they shall be saved. Meaning that what I'm saying to you is not to scare you about the end of the world as much as there is an outpouring of the power of God.
Oh, there's a track. Listen to it fade out. Oh man, Adam
so
says,
it's because he says vapor means mushroom. He looked it up.
Yeah, no, and look, Adam says, what English translation is he reading? And it says, look it up where? Oh man, oh, I'm sorry, but the lady who sent this into us, I mean, she was very upset about this, and rightly so. But at the same time, I'm not sure why she was watching this. I mean, honestly, if it wasn't for the show, I wouldn't have been able to stand 2 minutes of it. It was that bad. It was really bad. These are the people, and, you know, I'm sorry, people. You might think that we're mean, but if that's what you're listening to for, you know, for teachings, something is drastically wrong. But if we're mean, then...
How rude!
Why do you hate the Rob and Caleb Show?
Honestly, I think they're vain, stupid, and incredibly self-centered.
Okay, let's move on. So that concludes our Blood Moon segment. What time? Well, who cares what time we're at?
We're
having too much fun. Okay, so we got another email. Actually, we've gotten several emails about this. One person said to me, I found out that some people that I know are going to Monty Judah's outfit, and those of you who might not know Monty Judah, he's a teacher who, well, we're going to talk about him quite a bit here in a few seconds, but he has basically come out in one of his newsletters saying that the book of Hebrews should not be in our Bibles. Okay? And so this person who wrote me was saying, you know, I had some questions about this, blah, blah, blah. And then another person wrote me and said, one of my buddies is giving up on the book of Hebrews. What do I do? And he quoted this one specific verse. And I did some searching. I found a article. Who was the article by? You did the most of the work on this article. Who was the?
Are you talking about Daniel Gregg or Monty Judah?
Daniel Gregg. So that's the article that I found but I think that most of our listeners are going to know Monty Judah as the real dude who is giving up on the book of Hebrews and really influencing people to give up on the book of Hebrews. Okay. So Monty Judah came out in his September-October 2005 newsletter saying that the book of Hebrews should not be in our Bibles, and that, quote, I personally believe that the greater number of churchmen have been misled by something put into the New Testament. That is the book of Hebrews, end quote. Why would we follow Monty Judah anyway? From Monty Judah's, now check this out. I did some searching and I found some very interesting things. And I remember when this was going on. Okay, this happened in like, I don't know, 93, 94, something like that. Maybe even later than that, 96, 97. So 96. From Monty Judah's February 1996 newsletter, he writes, okay, now, once again, I can feel that we're going to get flack for this, but all I'm doing is reading his newsletter. Okay, this is out of his newsletter. This is out of Monty Judah's newsletter. So the question, this comes down to, it's not even education, but is Monty Judah qualified to talk about the book of Hebrews and whether or not it should be in our Bibles or not? Okay, this is from his 1996 newsletter. He writes, quote, after the Lord instructed me to do so, I declared that the Middle East Peace Accord of 1993 started the 70th week of Israel. Therefore, I am warning others to look for specific events to occur in 1996 and 1997, consistent with the timeline and the center event of the 7-year period, the abomination of desolation. To that end, I am preparing and warning others that the great tribulation spoken of by Daniel and Yeshua will begin February-March of 1997. These dates were set by God when he started the 70th week. If what I say does not happen, then brand me as a false prophet. Listen to me no more, and heap the ridicule on to prevent others from making the same mistake. But I would remind you, in accordance with the scripture, not to despise a prophetic utterance until it has been proven false. I call for the testing of all prophets. I have made my message and its measurement clear. If the altar is not stopped in February-March of 1997 in Jerusalem, then throw me on the trash heap. That's Monty Judah, end quote.
Wow. Was there a blood moon that year? Oh my goodness.
Okay, so this right here, in terms of, is he qualified to even be teaching the Bible to other people?
We need to post that. Is that on the internet? Could people find that?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And I've posted links to it in our show notes.
And he actually acknowledged, I mean, that's, yes, he doesn't dispute that he said those things.
No.
I mean, because he could just say, oh, I never said that.
No, when he came out, it was in his newsletters.
Okay, so this is documented.
After it didn't happen in February, March of 97. After it didn't happen, he was thinking about kind of, like maybe I shouldn't be teaching anymore. Okay. And then he basically came out and said, the Lord wouldn't have started this ministry if he wanted me to stop it. The Lord started it. Some of the followers want me to, the people that support me still want me to keep going. So since God's continuing to support the ministry, that means that he wants it to be, so I should keep teaching. And a bunch of the people who follow him, and people who follow Michael Rood too. A lot of people don't realize that Michael Rood made false prophecies.
I was there for that one.
Yeah, I was there for that too.
I wasn't aware of Monty Judah at the time. I had heard of him, but I didn't know what he was teaching. This is still early internet days when I lived in Spokane in the mid-late 90s. But Michael Rood he went on the circuit. He came around through Prophecy Club.
Yep.
And he made a couple rounds. With nice video and music and all this kind of stuff. Nice costumes that he wore.
Yeah, he wore a cummerbund when I saw him in I think it was 98.
That guy knew how to dress the part.
No doubt.
He looked like a priest.
Anyway, so Monty Judah keeps going, and Grace on the chat room says he's still actively speaking against the book of Hebrews, which I am aware of. So anyway, in terms of, a lot of people who still follow Monty Judah, and Michael Rood for that matter, say, oh, well, he repented of it. But this confuses me. If you are following Monty Judah, or if you are following Michael Rood, can you please show me anywhere in Scripture where it says, if a false prophet falsely prophesies, and he repents, accept him back and let him keep teaching? Is there any place in the Bible that it says that? I'm sorry, I just don't think there is. And so it baffles, what are we supposed to do with false prophets? You're not supposed to listen to him, and you're not supposed to fear him. Right?
Yeah.
So
you know, the one I are you going to segue this over to Greg's model of?
Well, okay. My point with Monty Judah, because Monty Judah is the one who is really pushing all this and really turning some heads for people, is that he's a false prophet. He shouldn't be listened to by anyone, and he's not qualified to teach the Bible. So if you are listening to Monty Judah, stop it.
Right. So the same guy who made such a big deal saying throw him on the trash heap if he's wrong is also telling us that we need to get rid of the book of Hebrews out of the Bible. But we're supposed to still not question that maybe this guy is a couple bricks short of a load.
Exactly. Okay, so now let's go to Greg. So this Daniel Gregg is a different gentleman who is also saying that we should throw out the book of Hebrews. Now, in do I have that here?
Well, I have it. What are you looking for, Caleb?
Well, I was just looking for all the references that he has.
He's got Daniel Gregg has a website where it's
called Torah Times,
TorahTimes.org, and he gives a huge
he overwhelms people
web page overwhelming proofs from his perspective of why Hebrews should not be. It should be part of the Apocrypha. He says.
Yeah. So, and which is interesting. These guys try to make it out like the book of Hebrews wasn't accepted as scripture until the 18 or 1900s.
Not only that, Greg's claim to fame. I mean, his big book is he claims that he has solved the mystery of all biblical chronology.
Okay, hang on just a sec.
So if that's not sensational enough, he has all that, and
if somebody. Here you go. Okay, look, Torah Resource right now is working on a biblical calendar book. Okay, and one thing we will not do at Torah Resource is come out and say that we've solved all biblical chronology. Michael Rood has done that. This Daniel Gregg has done that. If somebody comes out and says that they have solved all biblical chronology, there should be
another. What's rule of that? That's one of our rules.
Well, that's sensationalism.
Just a sensational claim. That's a claim that wants to sell a book, you know. But there are so many issues. I just spent some time. I spent about 2 hours just going through Greg's website generally. Daniel Gregg, Gregg. Boy, he's zealous, right? I mean, he reminds me kind of like a Lou White, someone who has a little bit of education. But then just enough to really be dangerous. There are so many issues with this chronology that he doesn't even recognize, and so we don't need to get into that. Maybe we could at some point, but I think today we were going to talk more about Hebrews, right?
Yeah. Okay. So here's the one thing I want to say: if I come to the scriptures like this, I believe that the scriptures are self-authenticating. They have been the scriptures since very early. It wasn't like some dude just showed up and was like, "Hey, you know what? I'm gonna put the apostolic scriptures together. These are in, these are out." That's not what happened. We've talked about the way that the canon was formed and whatnot, and in my mind, it shows the divine hand, how it was accepted. It was accepted by different groups. Different books were tried and tested and whatnot.
His claim, Greg's claim, is that Satan deceived.
Okay. But hang on just a sec. I come at the scriptures like this. I come at the scriptures saying, these are the scriptures. I've accepted the scriptures, okay? And they're God's word. And when something seemingly contradicts, I don't say, oh, the book must be wrong. Let's get rid of John because he disagrees with the synoptic gospels. I don't do that. What I say is that I'm not understanding something. The fault is mine. It's not the scriptures. It's mine. And what this Daniel Gregg and what Monty Judah have done is they've come and they've said, oh, well, I can't figure out how this reconciles with itself, so it must be wrong.
Right.
That's not the way to come at the scriptures, people. Okay, go ahead.
Well, if there's a couple different angles that we can talk about Gregg specifically and his teachings that he's putting out there in books and on the internet. But But one of the claims is that he says, I'm just reading this quote from his text from his website. After reviewing this evidence, it should be no surprise that Satan took no shortcuts in his program to corrupt the scriptures. So he wants to say that Satan has corrupted the scriptures. And so now we have to trust him to explain, that Hebrews doesn't belong, right? It should have been cut out. Why? Because he gives us grounds on something he calls Gnosticism. So he keeps, if you read his page, which takes a long time, it's very long.
It's huge.
About the book of Hebrews, he says he's proving everything. He says, I'm proving that Hebrews doesn't belong. But in his proving, he keeps talking about Gnostic teachings of the day. Say this, the Gnostic belief that ... The Gnostics taught this or that. But he never cites sources. He's created a religion called Gnosticism in his imagination. He never cites any Gnostic texts to support what he's trying to argue. And the problem he's going to have is that the sources that the scholars of the 1900s, early 1900s, created this idea of Gnosticism, which one of my teachers, Michael Allen Williams, wrote a really good book. It's called Dismantling the Dubious Category of Gnosticism. Anyway, is that there was this religion then. But what Greg doesn't realize, even if he goes to try to cite sources from Nag Hammadi texts or, what have you, they're going to be like 3rd century or later. And he's going to try to import those back to the 1st century to make this argument. That's one problem, is that he's invented a religion called Gnosticism, and that he wants to say that early Christians in the 1st century were influenced by this other religion called Gnosticism, and that the book of Hebrew, the letter to the Hebrews, is a Gnostic text. So that's one of his assumptions that he brings to his argument, but he never demonstrates. He gives no proof for it. It's his starting point. And that's one of his real weak places. I mean, you pull on that and the ground falls out underneath everything he's saying. Another issue is that he conflates information. And I think he doesn't have a strong grasp of historical method. I think a lot of his work was done before the Dead Sea Scrolls were published. So some of his phrases that he said, he'll say you can't use the Mishnah. He'll rightly say that using rabbinic texts too much, or without, uncritically to give background to the 1st century, that's anachronistic. He'll say that. But what he didn't have access to, apparently, is the Dead Sea Scrolls. So there's places where, we'll find Jewish cultural things in the rabbinic writings, but if we also find them in the Qumran texts, Dead Sea Scrolls, and elsewhere, we know that it had continuity into, in the 1st century and beyond. He doesn't understand that. He doesn't have, and so his understanding of Jewish culture in the 1st century is very, very lacking. He doesn't understand the Septuagint and the other Greek Jewish texts that were part of the larger Jewish world in Greek-speaking diaspora. There's just a lot of problems. But what he does, he says there are like 5 or 6 or 7 places in the Epistle of Hebrews that are just wrong factually.
Yeah.
That they are contrary to fact. And so those are the ones that I spent most of the time trying to understand what his point was, because there's just too much. But here's one of I'll give you an example. In 2 places, he says the Epistle of Hebrews in chapter 7:27 and in 10:11, it says it contradicts the idea of the Torah having a daily sin offering. So in other words, where it says offered daily, he says that must mean the Tamid offering, which is the lamb in the morning and the lamb at night, and that was a sin offering. That's what Greg is assuming. So Greg is assuming that the author of the Epistle of Hebrews is making the assertion that the Tamid, this lamb at morning and at night, every day.
Hang on just a second. Let's read it real quick.
Okay.
I just got it here. It's
7:27.
Who does not need daily, like those high priests, to offer up sacrifices first for his own sins and then for the sins of the people, because this he did once for all when he offered up himself.
Right.
I think that's pretty straightforward.
Saying that the daily there must mean that the author of Hebrews is associating the Tamid, which means Tamid doesn't mean daily; it means always. That was understood by the author of Hebrews as a type of sin offering, when in fact it's not. In the Torah, it's called olat tamid, a burnt offering that is continual, a continual burnt offering. Lamb in the morning, lamb at night, on and on and on. And I think that I think that Greg misses the point here. When in fact, the priestly duties are every day points to Yom Kippur. The priests are always watching and praying because they are always vigilant against their own sin and for the sins of the people. Because the accountability for sin is the ever-present reality for the priests. Because it's on them, right? If you look, it says that they bear the guilt of the sanctuary in Numbers 18. That's the Aaron and his sons bear the guilt of the sanctuary, and they eat the meat of the sin offerings. Not only that, in Leviticus 4, the first thing when it starts talking, Leviticus starts out with the olah, right, the burnt offerings. It talks about the other kinds of offerings that are voluntary, but then it gets into Leviticus 4. It starts talking about sin offerings. The first sin offering defined is that of the priest. If a priest sins, he has to do an offering. And then it goes to the people. If the people sin, they have to bring an offering. I think Greg is imagining that there were days where that there were no sin offerings. I guess he's I never saw where he comes out and says that, but it seems that that is what Greg is assuming, that there were days where there were never a sin offering. But it doesn't even matter. That's one side to this. The other is this phrase in Hebrew called daily that we see there in this passage, kath hemeron, doesn't mean only that it means each and every day. It just means according to the day. For example, in the Septuagint, kath hemeron is used in Numbers chapter 7, where remember that we had the leader of each of the tribes, they come in with the dedication of the altar, and they offer, Numbers gives these real intricate details of everything they brought. It's just it says according to the day, each daily, I guess we could translate. But it wasn't every single day. It just meant according to the demand of the day. I hope this isn't getting too heady for people. But Greg makes a false assumption in his effort to use this word daily in 7:27 and again in Hebrews 10:11 as a contrary to fact.
The one that I really want to get to, and the one that we've been, the initial email was asking about Hebrews 9:3 and 4. And my father has done, this is the one that Monty Judah hits home. Like, this is like his bread and butter to get rid of the book of Hebrews, is Hebrews 9:3 and 4. And, well, hang on, let me get there.
First of all, okay, so I'm going to set you up. There are places in the Epistle to the Hebrews where we're given information that we're not given in the Tanakh. Right? I mean, that's just generally true. For example, Isaac is a type of resurrection in chapter 11. We're not given that in Tanakh. When it talks about a prophet being sawed in two in chapter 11, which some say was probably Isaiah, That's not given in Tanakh. How can we can't prove that?
So then
so there's details like this. He tells us in chapter 9 that the jar that held the manna was golden. So it was maybe a jar, maybe a earthen vessel covered in gold, or maybe it was all gold. Tanakh never tells us that. So just because we get this type of information, it talks about Moses and in his time in Egypt, and he didn't despise association with Messiah. We're not told that in the Tanakh.
So what do you think it is?
So my point is that Hebrews is giving us all sorts of insight. I think Hebrews was written by someone who understood very clearly the priest. I think it was probably written by someone who was a priest.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who believe that. I tend to agree with you.
They're thinking very much in detail in terms of the priesthood and the Mishkan. And the author even tells us in chapter 9 of these things we cannot discuss in detail right now. In other words, he's giving a quick synopsis to make a bigger point. And he specifically tells us, I'm not going to get into detail.
I think it's interesting that he goes back to the Mishkan and not to the temple. Anyway, okay, so let me read here. Get back to it. Sorry, I'm keeping my eye on the chat room, too.
Right.
Thanks, everybody in the chat room, for keeping the discussion lively. We've had some interesting comments here. So in Hebrews 9, 3, and 4, this is really the one that I want to talk about with you. It says, and I'm reading now to the NASB. It says, behind the second veil there was a tabernacle which is called the Holy of Holies. Okay? Verse 4. Having a golden altar of incense and the Ark of the Covenant covered on all sides with gold, in which was a golden jar holding the manna, and Aaron's rod which budded, and the tables of the covenant. So the main point that Monty Judah makes is this, what is it, the altar of incense? Is that his main point? There is no pan of, altar of incense or whatever?
No, he says that it doesn't belong, that the altar of incense
belongs
is not in the Holy of Holies.
It's in the holy place, not the Holy of Holies.
Right.
Okay.
But this word could also mean just golden censer, which went in to the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur. And of course, Yom Kippur is the day that represents, atonement. But each day points to Yom Kippur. All the services of the year in the priesthood, and their offering of blood, ultimately comes to this time where the high priest has to go in to the Holy of Holies.
And so does the Torah use this word for altar, or the word that
the Septuagint does? Yeah, it uses the word. It can mean censer.
So in the Septuagint, this word is used as the censer that goes into the Holy of Holies.
Yes.
So in other words, Monty Judah and this Daniel Gregg guy, they're not doing due diligence, right? I'll tell you, I said that the blood moon thing doesn't tick me off. This ticks me off. When people start like, hey, let's throw out parts of the Bible, that's an attack from the evil one. This is how this is exactly how Christians and believers are starting to give up on God in general, is because they start saying, oh, no,
exactly.
The Torah is not anymore. So, that whole homosexuality thing, it also says you can't eat shrimp. So, let's throw that out. And then it's, oh, well, the book of Hebrews, let's get rid of that. And then it's, oh, well, John disagrees with the synoptic gospels on the Passion account. So let's get rid of that.
The Epistle of Hebrews, it gives the longest continuous citation of a Tanakh verse, Jeremiah 31, in all the apostolic writings. In Hebrews chapter 8, we have the longest citation of Tanakh. Not only that, in chapter 11, we see clearly that this author understood salvation by faith, right? And he had a comprehensive knowledge of salvation history, all the way back to Abel. And he shows how faith meant something in their life. They acted on their faith. In other words, there were works associated with faith. For example, in the epistle of Yaakov, the epistle of James, James talks about faith without works, but then he talks about Abraham and Rahab as two examples of someone who had faith that produced specific works. Well, guess what? The same things that Yaakov mentions, Abraham and Rahab, the epistle to Hebrews mentions in chapter 11. That it is so strange that this would be seen as a, quote, Gnostic type of text, because the Torah of Moses is it says those who transgress the Torah of Moses die at 2 or 3 witnesses. It affirms the validity of the Torah of Moses. Now, what this person doesn't understand is, because Greg comes and says, oh, Gnostics, whatever that means, believed that people had a spirit and a body and they were completely separate, and all you had to worry about was the spirit and the body was bad. But that is not the way the epistle to Hebrews explains anything about Scripture. It's talking about Yeshua as a priest.
Is Greg
according to the order of Melchizedek, which is a scripture that Yeshua himself cites, Psalm 110.
Is Greg trying to suggest that the writer of the Hebrews was Gnostic?
Yeah, or that he was capitulating to Gnosticism.
I'm glad you read. This would have ticked me off, this article. I'm trying to come at things a lot more lovingly and a lot more, let's have some brotherly love kind of a approach to things. But some things, like when people attack the Word of God, when people attack the Messiah and do so through the deity, trying to get rid of the deity of the Messiah, all these things, those kind of things really kind of get under my skin. I'm working on it, but okay. So basically, what you're saying is that, and my father has done work on this too. So my father, in our show notes, you can, and just on Torah Resource, just go to Torah Resource under Community. You can find my father's study on the Book of Hebrews, which is still going on, by the way. But he's done work on this too. So what you're telling me is that in Hebrews 9:4, this altar of incense, the word in the Septuagint, the Greek word in the Septuagint, is also translated as censer.
Yes. And then there's two, but that's not the only point that Greg wants to take issue with here. In 9:4, he says that Aaron's rod is misplaced and the pot of manna is misplaced. These are factual errors, says Daniel Gregg, that the Epistle to Hebrew makes. And then if the person who wrote this knew anything about the Torah in any detail, they would not have made this error. And the point is, in Numbers, chapter 17, it says, and place the rod of Aaron lifnei ha'edut mishmeret, which means to replace the matei Aharon, that's the rod of Aaron, lifnei ha'edut, before the testimony, which is the tablets. It's not before the Aron, not before the ark, but before the tablets. That's what the testimony is. And then it says the same thing in Exodus 16, verse 34. Aaron placed the jar of manna, lifnei ha'edut, lemishmaret. The same phrase. So we have this unique phrase for the pot of manna and Aaron's rod, lifnei ha'edut. It's the only time we get that phrase. Once with we get it with the rod of manna, or a rod of Aaron that budded, and the pot of manna. But what Greg says, that means in front of the ark, not in the ark, because he's saying that we have to read Hebrews 9:4 to say in which, in other words, that Hebrews 9:4 says that these things were in the ark is factually wrong.
Doesn't it sound like he's just? I mean, it sounds like he's
just grabbing things. He's against. And well, wait a minute. Here's the thing. But what he does. And I'm reading from his work now on his article on this passage. Any final doubt as to the meaning of the words before the testimony is removed by the following text. And he cites Exodus 27:21. in the tabernacle of the congregation without the veil, which is before the testimony. And he takes it, we have this phrase, before the testimony, just like we have it here and here. But the Hebrew is a different word altogether. But he's equating it because it's the same in his English translation. You see what I mean? So he doesn't look at the actual Hebrew to see that the Hebrew is different there. That there's a unique Hebrew phrase used only for the rod of Aaron and for the pot of manna. And this Exodus 27:21 has different Hebrew construction. It doesn't apply. But he's apparently not looking at the Hebrew here. He's looking at English translations that use the same prepositions. And so he equates them.
But it sounds to me like he's coming at the text. He's coming at the text of Hebrews with a preconceived notion that it's not Scripture already, because it looks like he's,
and that's the point here. There is, if someone's heart is bent against the epistle to the Hebrews, there's nothing we can't do anything about it. I mean, only God can change that. I think this guy is convinced. There's nothing anybody's going to say that's going to change this guy's mind. I think challenged to saying, look, man, you haven't proved to meet him in his world of rationality and proof. You have to say, look, man, you keep talking about Gnostic religion and Gnostic beliefs, but you're telling your readers what they are, but you're not giving them any sources. We're just supposed to take your word for it.
Yeah. So he's not quoting sources.
He's not citing any Gnostic texts or what time frame they were written in. He's not demonstrating this big lever fulcrum that he's using to pry Hebrews out of the canon. He's not telling us the sources, and he's not giving us his proof that even has a fulcrum and a lever that can do this. And he is already suspect because he doesn't understand the methodology that uses other Jewish sources, particularly with his chronology issues. Oh, golly, his chronology is so gone. For example, he believes Yeshua rose on the morning of the Shabbat.
What?
On a Shabbat morning. Yeah. So where it says, Miaton Sabbaton, in like Matthew 28:1, on one of the Sabbath, or first of the Sabbath of the week, he says that means on the first Sabbath of the counting of the Omer, I think is where but he says it's a weekly Shabbat in the morning is when Yeshua rose. So that's the women came to the tomb on Sabbath morning rather than on what we would say a Sunday morning. And he says because there was a mistake and Jews never used this way to count days of the week. Well, here again, he's looking and he says you can't use the rabbis because even though the rabbis use that, he says you can't use the rabbis because it's later. But he never looks at the Dead Sea Scrolls. We have Dead Sea Scrolls all over the place using first day of the week, second day of the week, and using Shabbat as the meaning week. First of the Shabbat, second of the Shabbat, fifth of the Shabbat, right? And then the seventh is the Shabbat. He never looked at the Dead Sea Scrolls. So his whole chronology crumbles because he's not using good method. But he's built a huge structure. This guy's built a huge house on sand. That's all I'm going to say.
So basically, the point is if you are following Monty Judah, or if you've found Daniel Gregg's article, not to be trusted. So yeah, is that all you got, or is there anything else you want to bring up, Rob?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, basically Gregg has solved all the calendar problems and has demonstrated for us clearly that the Epistle of Hebrews belongs with the rest of the Apocrypha. That it was.
I'm sorry, but if you're studying yourself.
Oh, Yeshua. He says Yeshua didn't eat Passover either. Yeshua ate the Last Supper on the 13th.
There's a lot of people who believe that, and I think we'll actually talk about that next week.
So,
yeah, if you're doing studies yourself, or if you come across somebody who says that the Book of Hebrews should not be in the canon, then please stop and really do some research. Because
what's funny here, because Gregg, here's one other thing. Gregg also says that when Yeshua said this is the blood of the covenant, it was the third cup of the meal. So on what basis does he say that this is a third cup of the meal?
Yeah, if it's not
if he's not resorting to other, later rabbinic pictures of the Passover Seder.
Yeah.
We don't have that in Tanakh, but yet Daniel's teaching that the Last Supper, he's talking about the third cup of the meal, but then he says it was on the 13th. So was it a Passover or not? There's just so many issues that he's not using his own. He probably hasn't anybody check up on any of these things, because he seems to have has had a couple editions, newer editions come out. In other words, he's continually refining his work.
Okay, well, I hope this has opened some eyes and maybe shed some light on things for some people. The one difficult thing about going live is, and I've talked about this with Gary and with Rob, is our end music, because it's difficult. It's going to be a timing issue. So bear with me. This might not work out the way we want it to. We're going to try to do this right, though. Okay. We're going to try to orchestrate this all well. So here we go. Yeah, I hope that this has shed some light on things for people. If you're all about the blood moons, okay, I guess we'll all just have to see, right? We'll all just have to hang in there and find out. But big thanks to everyone in the chat room. It's been fun watching you all talk and get some feedback from you guys. So yeah, thank you to you guys. If you want a sticker, then please email me, chegg@torahresource.com. If you want to make comments about anything, you can do so on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Rob and Caleb Show. And you can also email us personally, chegg@torahresource.com, or vanhoff@torahresource.com. Don't get snookered by people who say it shouldn't be in the Bible.